Hey, it's Charlie again, and today we're going to talk about the atheist. So let me put you up on your little pedestal here, and we'll talk about the atheist. I'd like to read you something from Matthew first. Matthew 5:22 says, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, 'Raka,' is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." Now, raka was an Aramaic term which means an empty head. So calling somebody an empty head doesn't carry the same weight as calling somebody a fool. In other words, if you call somebody a fool, you should be sure that you're right, because if not, you're in danger of the fire of hell. That's how I read that passage. And based on Jesus' words there, you'd think that I wouldn't dare call somebody a fool. However, the Bible resolves that dilemma for me. In fact, the Bible defines what a fool is many times. In the book of Proverbs, in the Psalms, and particularly in Psalm 14:1, it says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." Either that statement is true or it's not true. If it's true, then we can determine that it is true, and we have a basis by which to call an atheist a fool. So, in order to do that, it's not very difficult either. Atheist comes from the words no, and theism, God. Now, in order to make the claim that there is no God, in other words, I'm an atheist and I'm saying there's no God, you would need to be fully knowledgeable on the subject. So let's think about God for a minute. God is, and I'm not talking about a lesser God like a polytheistic, one of many gods. I'm talking about the Creator God, the one that we are logically going to come to the conclusion must exist here eventually. Anybody that even contemplates God in the ultimate sense knows that He is omniscient, all-knowing, He's omnipotent, all-powerful, and He's omnipresent, which means He's everywhere at once. Paul, remember yesterday I talked about Paul in the Areopagus, said, "In Him we live and move and have our being." That would be His omnipresence. He's everywhere, and we are existing in God at all times. And yet we're not God, okay? So let's make sure that we don't get that funny idea in our head right now. The fool says in his heart there is no God. Well, in order to say that there is no God, you would need to be completely knowledgeable on the subject of God. But because God is omniscient, all-knowing, you would need to know every single thing about God, every possible aspect of God there is to know in order to make that claim. Now, if you made that claim without having the sufficient knowledge, all of God's knowledge, in order to make the claim, then you're obviously a fool. You're making a claim about something you cannot prove. There's no God. Well, you're a fool. That's all there is to it. And if you made the claim with sufficient knowledge, because you had complete, absolute knowledge of God, that means that you were God, and you'd be denying yourself, and hence you're a fool, because God would never deny Himself. So it's that simple to refute atheism. Atheism is a corrupt moral system. And I say moral because in order to make the claim that you're an atheist, it comes back to moral judgments. I want to be a sexual pervert. I want to exercise my own free will, and I'm not going to let God get in the way. I'm going to make these moral choices, whatever they are. And because of that, I have to deny that there's a God. And in order to deny Him, you're making a moral judgment. You're also making a fool's judgment, because you cannot infinitely know the subject of God. That's all there is to it. Okay? So from there, from the atheist, we have a couple steps down. We have what's called agnostics. Meaning no. Gnosis, which is from the Greek word knowledge, so no knowledge. So being an agnostic means I have no knowledge of God. There's two types of agnostics. You've got what's called a hard agnostic and a soft agnostic. A hard agnostic would say, I cannot know that there is a God. A soft agnostic would say, I simply don't know if there's a God. Okay, do you understand the difference? I can't know there's a God, hard agnosticism, and I don't know if there's a God, soft agnosticism. Okay, the first option, hard agnosticism, is the option of a fool. There's no doubt about it. because in order to make the claim that I can have no knowledge of God, I can't know if there is a God, you would, again, just like the atheist, you would need to be completely knowledgeable on the subject of God. You'd have to have all of God's knowledge in order to say, I can't have any knowledge of God. And you'd be denying that you have omnipotent or omniscient knowledge, and therefore you'd be a fool. And if you made the claim and you didn't have that knowledge, then you'd be a fool because you were making a claim that you couldn't satisfactorily back up. So hard agnosticism is very similar to atheism in the fact that only a fool would claim I'm an atheist or I'm a hard agnostic. The third form of the second form of agnosticism is soft agnosticism. That's to say, I don't know if there's a God. And these short lectures are being presented to bring somebody that is either a soft agnostic or a confused religious person to an understanding of God. It's not here to convert the atheist who's in some way morally deficient. And it's also not here to try to refute a hard agnostic that says, I'm a hard agnostic and that's all there is to it, and what Charlie is saying is foolish. It's not foolish. Either you have all of God's knowledge and you're denying yourself, or you don't have all of God's knowledge and you're making an insufficient claim on the subject of God. Either way, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. That's pretty much all there is to it when it comes to this. From this point on, we're going to address people that are at least willing to acknowledge either I don't know if there's a God, or I'm certain there's a God, but I don't know what he's like, or I do know what he's like, but you're wrong about it and we'll get you corrected. Something along those lines. But if you're a supposed atheist or a hard agnostic, I can't help you. You need to get out of your own moral deficiencies first, and then come to the table reasonably saying, I just don't know if there's a God. So that's today's lesson. I hope you'll come back for another one, and we won't be so hard on people in the future, because only fools deny there's God, and everybody else is in some position of just, seeking after the God that they do know exists. Okay?